The film begins in Hamburg, Germany, at the German National Opera, where an orchestra is gearing up for rehearsals. As they prepare, armed criminals are seen approaching. Unaware of the threat, the orchestra members continue their routine. Once the conductor arrives, they start rehearsing, but soon the gangsters burst in and fire shots into the air. John leads a rescue team that arrives just in time. He outlines their final plan while the gangsters begin a live broadcast, demanding a ransom of $300 million, announcing they've taken control. John instructs his team to hold fire and await his command. However, the gangsters' leader kills a woman, pushing Matteo to disregard John's orders and shoot at the criminals. With no other option, John orders his entire tactical unit to engage and eliminate the gangsters. A fierce battle ensues, showcasing the tactical unit's skill and expertise, ultimately resulting in the takedown of most of the criminals.
Go, go, go! Next stage area.
After a brief period of intense gunfire, John starts to blame the incident for going against his commands. However, it turns out he has been shot and is in bad shape. Suddenly, a gangster disguised as a hostage stands up, and Matteo takes him down, but unfortunately, John is fatally shot.
Call him. Tell him we'll be a little late for dinner.
5 years later in Romania, Matteo, now a retired Special Forces member, works at a mill in Assam. His life is unhappy due to what happened with John. When he receives a photo, it triggers memories of the happy times he spent with John's family. On payday, he announces his retirement, books a ticket to Bucharest, and gets ready to leave. Meanwhile, in Amsterdam, an Interpol team led by Agent Shira intercepts a drug shipment and detains members of various mafia groups.
Get the fuck up!
They capture one of them and inform a mob boss named Shaban that Interpol has intercepted their shipment. It turns out one of the detainees is an undercover Interpol agent who aided in the drug bust. Shira tells him he needs to exert more pressure to ensure the mob bosses are arrested.
I promise you, this was just a warm-up.
Matteo arrives in Amsterdam, where we meet Paul, a businessman involved in cryptocurrencies. Over the phone, Paul tells his client that everything is fine, but when he checks his computer for updates on his investments, things look problematic. Matteo arrives at John's house and meets his daughter, Angie. He asks her to call her mother, Helen. Surprised to see him, Helen invites Matteo in for coffee. Inside, Matteo learns that Helen is now married to Paul. She confronts Matteo for not attending John's funeral, despite John's close relationship with him. Matteo admits it was his fault John died, but Helen, having moved on, doesn't appreciate being reminded.
What? You don't get to do that.
Could have been me.
Shut up!
Matteo decides to leave, but Helen asks him to stay a little longer. Helen tells Matteo he can use some of John's remaining items if he wishes and expresses that it's nice to see him again.
It's good to see you. It just...
Meanwhile, Siobhan has a disagreement with his chef about a dish that isn't appealing to customers at his restaurant.
Now go.
After some time, Siobhan and his team realize there was a spy among them. When Paul gets home, he finds Matteo there with Angie. Helen tells Paul that Matteo was John's friend and will be staying for a while. After dinner, Matteo sits outside, reminiscing about the time he spent with John in Afghanistan, discussing their families.
I thought you wanted to know.
We got the assets, so you have to run them from point.
Angie tells her mom that she likes Matteo before going to bed. Paul then has a talk with Matteo, who tells him that there is always something worth fighting for.
talking to you. Good.
Helen reassures Paul that there's nothing to worry about concerning Matteo, since he and John had been through a lot together. Matteo finds a note from Angie, asking him not to leave without saying goodbye. In the morning, as Matteo goes for a jog, he sees Helen and Angie heading to school, and Helen asks him to take care of her dog while she's at work. Siobhan visits Paul to ask about the missing 15 million euros, and Paul tries to explain that there's a small issue with the crypto market, but it will be resolved soon. He asks for a day while Siobhan looks at a picture of his family, reminding him he only has one day.
Fuck up, Paul.
Outside, an undercover Interpol agent tracks them, but inside, it's revealed the agent is also being followed. Matteo, bored with his routine, tries some carpentry before Helen invites him for an outing where he enjoys spending time, especially with Angie. Worried, Paul comes home distressed. When Helen questions him, he says he has some financial accounts to handle, hiding the truth about Siobhan. Meanwhile, tourists are horrified to find a dead body hanging from a bridge, discovering it was a murder committed by Siobhan's men after identifying the victim as an Interpol mole. Shira and her partner arrive at the crime scene as Matteo stays home working on his carpentry. The news reports a drop in cryptocurrency value as Paul receives a call from Siobhan demanding his money. Although Paul assures him he will resolve it, Siobhan sends his men to handle the situation. Shira and her partner understood that the gangsters were sending them a signal when Angie began teasing Matteo about his scars before giving him a tight hug, which Helen noticed. Paul called Helen to tell her he couldn't come over because he had some business to take care of. While they were out for pizza, Angie showed Matteo a drawing. Helen asked Matteo to stay a bit longer for Angie's sake. Suddenly, some gangsters showed up and started following them. Angie noticed and ran back to stop them. Matteo saved her from getting hit, but she was kidnapped and Matteo was knocked down.
Bitch! Are you okay? Give me a phone!
He grabbed a bicycle to chase the car. Meanwhile, Helen informed Paul about the kidnapping. Paul called Siobhan to ask for help, but Siobhan just hung up. Matteo continued following the car, jumped onto one of the cars, and fought with the gangsters, which caused a collision with another car. Matteo fell and remembered John telling him they were family. He woke up handcuffed in a hospital room. Shira then introduced herself to Helen and Paul. Soon after, Matteo was released, and Shira asked him about his next steps. He said he was going to rescue Angie. Shira gave him information about Siobhan and other related gangs, stating that Angie's kidnapping was personal. When they asked Helen and Paul if they knew anything, Paul remained silent. Shira hands Matteo her business card. During this, one of Siobhan's men notices their actions. Angie is now held captive at Siobhan's club, where she's informed that Matteo has left the hospital. Holding a drawing Angie gave him, Matteo recalls when John asked him to be Angie's godfather. He gathers some items for a rescue mission, and when Paul warns him about Siobhan's connection with the ties, confronting him, Paul confesses he owes Siobhan 15 million euros. Matteo takes John's guns and orders Paul to call Siobhan, convincing him they have the money. Siobhan agrees to a trade for Angie, instructing them to bring the money to a construction site. Matteo promises Helen he'll bring Angie back. Meanwhile, Interpol figures out Paul knows something, but shortly after, Matteo surprises his partner and leaves with his car. Matteo arrives at the construction site for the exchange. He asks the gangsters he meets about Angie, but they inform him they only agreed to spare her life in exchange for the money. They forcefully take his bag, but when the leader checks it, it turns out to be a bomb. The explosion incapacitates some gangsters, and the rest are knocked out by the blast. Matteo then drags the surviving leader home for interrogation. Helen is kidnapped by one of Shaban's men, who then gets into a brawl with an Interpol agent. During the fight, the gangster repeatedly slashes the agent with a blade. Helen fires her gun to scare the thug away. Paul packs his things to leave while Matteo ties up the captured gangster and tortures him for information on Angie. Initially resistant, the gangster eventually breaks down and reveals Angie's location. Helen takes care of the wounded Interpol agent, but when the agent requests help from Paul, Paul coldly ignores him and heads to his car. Unfortunately, another of Shaban's men is waiting for Paul and kills him.
Fisher!
Shira arrives just as the injured gangster flees, comforting his partner inside and assuring him he'll receive a medal for his bravery. Matteo tells Shira to call for backup as he sets off for the rescue. Shaban becomes anxious when he hasn't heard from his men and interrogates Angie about whether Matteo will come for her. Angie confidently says he will. Matteo arrives at the club. When the bodyguards try to stop him, a fight breaks out. Shira arrives and they start shooting at the gangsters. The battle gets intense as Shira and Matteo fight together to clear the place. Seeing the situation turn dire, Shaban decides to flee. He instructs his men to stay behind, leading to a 2-on-2 fight between Matteo and Shira against Shaban's guards. Meanwhile, Shaban continues to run, dragging Angie with him as the fight rages on. Matteo decides to confront Shaban on his own. When he encounters Shaban with Angie, Shaban threatens to kill her if Matteo comes any closer. In a quick move, Matteo hurls a knife into Shaban's chest, but Shaban manages to shoot Matteo as well. Fortunately, Matteo survives, and Angie rushes to check on him. 6 months later, Angie is with Helen, expressing her concern about whether Matteo will ever return, as he is once again alone on a boat, drifting on the water. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the sheriff's partner receives a Medal of Honor, and Shira arrives to inform him that there are still more tasks ahead.
If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy to hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice, just to be sure. You should watch the whole movie. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe for more video like this.